Welcome back. I took a break of a couple days, kind of to think about what I wanted to talk about a little bit. Well, and also I was kind of lazy. I didn't do videos for a couple days. Um, so what it comes down to is I'm going to do a video about something, a topic that I was going to address a few days back, but I changed my mind at the last minute and I did something else. Um, what I wanted to talk about today was invisible disability, um, specifically traumatic brain injury is an invisible disability. There are hundreds of invisible disabilities out there. It's any disability that you can't see. Um, that's the definition of invisible disability, just a disability that you can't see. So, traumatic brain injury definitely is one, but there are many, many out there. What I want to say, first off, is I'm not a doctor. Um, I don't have any credentials in that. I'm not um, a neuropsychologist or anything. Um, I'm just someone who's been living with TBI since they were 8. I'm 49 now, so 41 years almost. Um, what I'd like to say about TBI as an invisible disability, um, sometimes people will notice that it's taking you longer to form coherent thoughts or just to complete a task. It's taking a little bit longer. What I'd like to say about that is just in the case of traumatic brain injury, a lot of times, instead of just one thought process, a person with TBI will have 4 or 5 going on at any one time instead of just the one. So instead of just a thought process going from point A to point B, your brain has to rewire itself. So instead of just going from point A to point B, your thought process goes from point A over to point C, then up to point Z, over to point X, back to point J, and then over to point B. So it does take a little bit longer, but you get there. And what I want to say about that is it'll get better. It takes a while to get there, but the more and more experience you have with it, and the more connections you make between different things, the better it'll get. That's the main thing that I found in my graduate work in college was that I made more connections. So instead of going from point A to point C and then to point Z and then to point X and then to point J and then to point B, maybe you narrow that down a little bit. You actually go from point A to point Z and then back to point B. I don't know how to describe how that happens. In my experience, it's just the aha moment for me was when I realized that so many things that don't appear related actually are, and there are connections between them, and I guess things aren't so compartmentalized. It's more like you have this box, and there's a box right here, so there's some space in common instead of just having the one box here and then the one box over here, if that makes sense. And I'm going off again on, I'm losing track of my thoughts. And let's see, I was talking about TBI as an invisible disability. And I know what I was doing now. I was trying to explain how it's so hard, how it's harder to get from, how it's harder to form a thought. Instead of going just from point A to point B, you might go from point A to up here, to down here, to over here, to back to here. And the more connections that you make between different things, the more it will make sense to you, and the more of those steps you'll be able to cut out. Instead of going from here to here to here and back to here, you can just go from here over to here and then back down to here. And eventually, for some things, you'll actually be able to go from here to here. But I have no way of explaining why that is. I know in my previous job, I worked up front in a restaurant, taking orders in a busy lobby. So there was lots of background noise, and I was taking orders and being pretty accurate in that, and then making correct change back after people had paid, and then managing my till so there wasn't too much money in there, so drop some in the safe and make sure that everything matches up. And then making sure the lobby stayed clean. And people would say to me, how is that easier? How is that easier than making a burrito and rolling it up? I don't know how to explain it. It just is. It's just whatever works for you. It's weird. It makes no logical sense. It really doesn't. You just have to work at it. You just really have to work at it. You have to be positive. Every morning when you wake up, even if you can only find one thing positive in your life, then focus on that. Focus on that one thing. Then pretty soon it will be 2 things, then it'll be 4 things, then it'll be 8 things. Someone made a comment on one of my previous videos. Whatever you focus on, it'll get bigger. So just plug away at it. Do your best. Figure out a way to make more connections. The more connections you make, at least in my experience, the more connections you make, the easier it will be. As I said, TBI is an invisible disability. Please be patient with others out there. There are a lot of invisible disabilities out there. Chronic pain, whatever they are. Just be patient with each other. You don't know what people have been going through. Could be anything. I mean, people could be having a really bad day. They could have had a really bad life. You don't know. You don't know what it is. So just stay positive. Be excellent to each other. That's the best way I can think to sum this all up. Be excellent to each other and party on, dudes.